You have already learned all living cells have to be provided with nutrients, oxygen, and other essential substances. Also, the waste or harmful substances produced have to be removed continuously for healthy functioning of tissue. It is therefore essential to have efficient mechanism for the movement of these substances to the cells and forms the cells. Different groups of animals have evolved different methods for this transport. Simple organisms like sponges and coelacanths circulate water from their surrounding through their body cavities to facilitate the cells to exchange these substances. More complex organisms use special fluids with their bodies to transport such materials. Blood is the most commonly used body fluids by most of the higher organisms, including humans, for this purpose. Another body fluid, lymph, also help in the transport of their certain substances. In this chapter, you will learn about the composition and properties of blood and lymph. And the mechanism of circulation of blood is also explained here in blood. Blood is a special connective tissue consisting of a fluid matrix plasma and form element plasma. Plasma is a straw-colored viscous fluid constituting nearly 55% of the blood's 90 to 92% of plasma is water and protein contributes 6 to 8% of it. Fibrinogenes, globulins, and albumins are the major proteins. Fibrinogen are needed for clotting or coagulation of blood. Globulins primarily are involved in defense mechanism of the body and the albumins help in osmotic balance. Plasma also contains a small amount of minerals like Na+, Ca++, Mg++, SO3-, Cl-, etc. Glucose, amino acids, lipids, etc. are also present in plasma as they are always in transit in the body. Factors for coagulation or clotting of blood are also present in the plasma in an inactive form. Plasma without the clotting factor is called serum. क्या plasma without the clotting factor is called serum. Formed element erythrocytes, leukocytes, and platelets are collectively called formed element and they constitute nearly 45% of the blood. Erythrocytes are red blood cells are the most abundant of all the cells in blood. A healthy adult man has on an average 5 million to 5.5 million of RBCs per mm cube of blood. RBCs are formed in the red bone marrow. In the adult, RBCs are divided of nucleus in the most of the mammals and are biconcave in shape. They have a red colored iron containing complex protein called hemoglobin, hence the color and name of these cells. A healthy individual has 12 to 16 grams of hemoglobin in every 100 ml of blood. These molecules play a significant role in transport of respiratory gases. RBCs have an average lifespan of 120 days after which they are destroyed in the spleen. Leukocytes. Leukocytes are also known as white blood cells as they are colorless due to the lack of hemoglobins. They are nucleated and are relatively lesser in number, which average 6,000 to 8,000 per mm cube of blood. Leukocytes are generally short-lived. We have two main categories of WBC, ग्रेन्यूलोसाइट्स एंड एग्रेन्यूलोसाइट्स. जो ग्रेन्यूलोसाइट्स होता है उसमें न्यूट्रोफिल्स, इयोसिनोफिल्स और बेसोफिल्स 3 प्रकार का होता है और जो एग्रेन्यूलोसाइट होता है उसमें स्पेशली सिर्फ 2 होता है, लिम्फोसाइट और मोनोसाइट. न्यूट्रोफिल्स आर द मस्ट एबंडेंट। न्यूट्रोफिल जो होता है वो डब्ल्यू बी सी का मस्ट एबंडेंट होता है। इसमें 60 to 65% ऑफ सॉरी फ्रेंड्स, जो न्यूट्रोफिल्स होता है ये डब्ल्यू में लगभग 60 to 65% पाया जाता है। और जो बेसोफिल्स होता है वो ये सबसे कम मात्रा में पाया जाता है, 0.5 to 1%। न्यूट्रोफिल्स एंड मोनोसाइट्स, जो न्यूट्रोफिल्स और मोनोसाइट्स होता है ये नियर अबाउट 6 to 8% होता है। और ये फैगोसाइट सेल्स होता है, ये डिस्ट्रॉय करता है फॉरेन पार्टिकल्स को जो हमारे बॉडी में इंटर करते हैं। बेसोफिल सेक्रेट हिस्टामिन, सेरोटोनिन एंड हिपेरिन। इसे मैं याद किया हूँ SH², मतलब S फॉर सेरोटोनिन, H फॉर हिस्टामिन एंड हिपेरिन। क्या? सेरोटोनिन, हिस्टामिन एंड हिपेरिन ETC एंड आर इन्वॉल्व इन इन्फ्लेमेटरी रिएक्शन। और ये सारे किस में इन्वॉल्व होते हैं? इन्फ्लेमेटरी रिएक्शंस में। इयोसिनोफिल्स ये नियर अबाउट 2 से 3% होता है और ये इन्फेक्शन को रेजिस्ट करता है एंड आर आल्सो कार्ड, और इसे एसोसिएटेड विथ एलर्जिक रिएक्शन। lymphocytes are 20 to 25% are of टू मेजर टाइप्स B एंड T। जो लिम्फोसाइट्स होता है ये जनरली ज़्यादातर दो प्रकार में पाया जाता है, B फार्म और T फार्म, और ये लगभग 20 से 25% होता है। बोथ दोनों B एंड T lymphocytes are responsible for immune response of the body. Platelets also called thrombocytes, प्लेटलेट्स को थ्रोम्बोसाइट्स भी कहते हैं, आर सेल फ्रेगमेंट्स प्रोड्यूस्ड फ्रॉम मेगाकार्योसाइट स्पेशल सेल्स इन द बोन मैरो। ब्लड नॉर्मली कंटेन 1.5 लाख से 3.5 लाख प्लेटलेट्स पर mm3। Platelets can release a variety of substances, most of which are involved in coagulation or clotting of blood. A reduction in their number can lead to clotting disorder, which will lead to excessive loss of blood from the body. ही हा 18.1.2 वाला टॉपिक्स ख़त्म हो गया और अब हम पढ़ेंगे अबाउट ब्लड ग्रुप्स। तो चलो अब पढ़ते हैं। एज यू नो, ब्लड ऑफ ह्यूमन बींग्स डिफर्स इन सर्टेन एस्पेक्ट्स थ्रो इट appears to be similar. Various types of grouping of blood has been done. To such grouping, A, B, O, RH, negative, positive are widely used all over the world. अब हम पढ़ेंगे ABO ग्रुपिंग के बारे में। ABO grouping is based on presence or absence of two surface antigens on the RBC, namely A and B. ABO ये जो ग्रुपिंग होता है ये सिर्फ दो एंटीजन्स के प्रेजेंस और अब्सेंस के आधार पे इन ग्रुप्स को बांटा गया है और वो है एंटीजन ए और एंटीजन बी। सिमिलरली इसी प्रकार प्लाज्मा ऑफ डिफरेंट इंडिविजुअल्स कंटेन टू नेचुरल एंटीबॉडीज़। जो हमारा प्लाज्मा होता है ये अलग अलग दो प्रकार के नेचुरल एंटीबॉडीज़ को भी कंटेन करता है। जैसे कि देखते हैं आगे क्या है। द डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ एंटीजन्स एंड एंटीबॉडीज इन द 4 ग्रुप ऑफ ब्लड AB एंड O आर गिवन इन टेबल 18.1। कौन कौन सा एंटीबॉडीज? एंटी A, एंटी B, नील, एंटी A, एंटी B। चलो भाई अब पढ़ते हैं, आगे देखते हैं। टेबल 18.1 में ये लिखा था, जो कुछ भी लिखा था टेबल तो यहाँ एक्सप्लेन होगा नहीं। यू प्रोबेबली नो दैट ड्यूरिंग ब्लड ट्रांसफ्यूजन एनी ब्लड कैनॉट बी यूज्ड. The blood of a donor has to be carefully matched with the blood of recipient before any blood transfusion to avoid severe problems of clumping destruction of RBC. The donor compatibility is also shown in the table 18.1, and we are skipped table 18.1. From the above mentioned table, it is evident that group O blood can be denoted to person with any other blood group, and hence O group individuals are called universal donor. जो ओ ग्रुप होता है ये सबको देता है दान, लेकिन खुद के जब उसका पारी आता है तो उसे कुछ नहीं मिलता है दान। पर्सन विथ ए बी ये है सबसे बड़ा भिखारी, सबका लेता है लेकिन देता किसी को नहीं। चलो भाई आगे चलते हैं। देयर फॉर सच पर्सन कॉल्ड यूनिवर्सल रेसिपिएंट। ए बी को क्या बोलते हैं? यूनिवर्सल रेसिपिएंट अर्थात महा अखंड भिखारी। And now we are started about RH grouping. Point number 18.1.3.2. Another antigens. The RH antigen similar to one presents in rhesus monkey. Hence RH is also observed on the surface of RBCs of majority, nearly 80% of humans. Such individuals are called RH positive, and those in whom this antigen is absent तो उसे बोल देते हैं RH नेगेटिव। मतलब जिसके अंदर होता है ये एंटीजन, कौन सा? रीसस मंकी RH एंटीजन जिसके अंदर होता है उसको बोलते हैं RH पॉजिटिव, और जिसके अंदर नहीं होता है उसे बोलते हैं RH नेगेटिव। एंड दोज इन whom this antigen is absent is called RH negative. An RH negative person, if exposed to RH positive blood, will form specific antibodies against the RH antigen. मतलब अगर एक RH नेगेटिव व्यक्ति एक्सपोज कर देगा RH पॉजिटिव ब्लड में तो उसका स्पेशल एंटीबॉडी उसके अगेंस्ट एक्शन ले लेगा और फिर काउंट हो जाएगा। देयरफॉर RH ग्रुप शुड आल्सो बी मैच्ड बिफोर ट्रांसफ्यूजन। अ स्पेशल केस ऑफ RH incompatibility has been observed between the RH negative blood of a pregnant mother with RH positive blood of fetus. RH antigens of the fetus do not get exposed to the RH negative blood of the mother in the first pregnancy, as the two bloods are well separated by the placenta. However, during the delivery of the first child, there is responsible of exposure of the maternal blood to a small amount of RH positive blood from the fetus. In such case, the mother's starts preparing antibodies against RH antigens in her blood. In case of her subsequent pregnancy, the RH antigens from the mother, RH negative, can leak into the blood of the fetus and destroy the fetal RBC. This could be fatal to the fetus or could cause severe anemia and jaundice to the baby. This condition is called arthroblastosis fetalis. क्या? Arthroblastosis fetalis. This can be avoided by administering RH negative antibodies to the mothers immediately after the delivery of the first child. Coagulation of bloods. Now we will be talking about coagulation of blood. आप जानते हैं अच्छी तरह से कि जब कहीं हमारा अंगुली हाथ कट जाता है तो हमें दुख होता है, अर्थात हर्ट होता है, अर्थात पेन होता है। योर वाउंड डज नॉट कंटिन्यू टू ब्लीड, और ये लगातार ब्लड निकलता नहीं रहता है, कुछ देर के बाद ये रुक जाता है। लेकिन क्यों रुक जाता है, कैसे रुक जाता है, इसी के बारे में हम बात करेंगे। दिस इज अ मैकेनिज्म, यह एक मैकेनिज्म है टू प्रिवेंट एक्सेसिव लॉस ऑफ ब्लड फ्रॉम द ट्यूमा। चलो ना, अब अगर हम एक्सप्लेनेशन दे सकते हैं कोआगुलेशन ऑफ ब्लड का Yeah, you would have observed a dark reddish brown scum formed at the site of a cut or an injury over a period of time. It is a clot or coagulation formed mainly of a network of threads called fibrin in which dead and damaged formed elements of blood are trapped. Fibrin are formed by conversion of inactive fibrinogen in the plasma by the enzyme thrombin. Thrombin, in turn, are formed from another inactive substance present in the plasma called prothrombin. An enzyme complex thrombokinase is required for the above reaction. This complex is formed by a series of linked enzymic reaction cascade process involving a number of factors present in the plasma in an inactive state. An injury or a trauma stimulates the platelets in the blood to release certain factors which activate the mechanism of coagulations. Certain factors released by tissue at the site of injury also can initiate coagulations. Calcium ion play a very important role in clotting. Lymph 18.2, and now we are going at a new points, that is lymph tissue fluid. As the blood passes through the capillary in tissue, some water along with many small water soluble substances move out into the spaces between the cells of tissue, leaving the larger proteins and most of the formed element in the blood vessels. This fluid released out is called the interstitial fluid or tissue fluid. It has the same mineral distribution as that in plasma. Exchange of nutrients, gases, etc. between the blood and the cells always occur through this fluid. An elaborate networks of vessels called the lymphatic system collect this fluid and drains it back to the major veins. The fluid present in the lymphatic system is called lymph. Lymph is a colorless fluid containing specialized lymphocytes which are responsible for the immune responses of the body. Lymph is also an important carrier for nutrients, hormones, etc. Fats are absorbed through lymph in the lacteals present in the intestinal villi. Circulatory pathway. The circulatory patterns are of two types, open or closed. Open circulatory system is present in arthropods and molluscs in which blood pumped by the heart passes through large vessels into open spaces or body cavities called sinuses. Annelids and chordates have a closed circulatory system in which the blood pumped by the heart is always circulated through a closed network of blood vessels. This pattern is considered to be more advantageous as the flow of fluid can be more precisely regulated. All vertebrates possess a muscular chambered heart. Fishes have a two-chamber heart with an atrium and a ventricles. Amphibians and the reptiles have a chambered heart with two atria and a single ventricles, whereas crocodile, birds and mammals possess a four-chamber heart with two atria and two ventricles. In fishes, the heart pumps out deoxygenated blood which is oxygenated by gills and supplied to the body parts from where deoxygenated blood is returned to the heart. In amphibians and reptiles, the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the gills, lungs, skins, and the right atrium gets deoxygenated blood from other body parts. However, they get mixed up in the single ventricles which pump out mixed blood. In birds, mammals, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood received by the left and right atria, respectively, passes on the ventricles of the same sides. Ventricles pump it out without any mixing up Two separate circulatory pathways are present in these organisms. Hence, these animals have double circulation. Let us study the human circulatory system. What's new topic are human circulatory system. Human circulatory system, also called the blood vascular system, consisting of a muscular chamber heart, a network of closed branching blood vessels and blood, the fluid which is circulated. Heart, the mesodermally derived organ, is situated in the thoracic cavity in between the two lungs, slightly tilted to the left. It has the size of a clenched fist. It is protected by a double-walled membranous bag. Pericardium, including the pericardial fluid. Our heart has four chambers, two relatively smaller upper chamber called atria and two larger lower chamber called ventricles. A thin muscular wall called the interatrial septum separates the right and left atria, whereas a thick wall, the inner interventricular septum, separates the left and right ventricles. The atrium and the ventricles of the same side are also separated by a thick fibrous tissue called the atrioventricular septum. However, each of these septa are provided with an opening through which the two chambers of the same side are connected. The opening between the right atrium and right ventricle is guarded by a wall formed of three muscular flaps or cusps. The tricuspid valve, whereas a bicuspid or mitral valves guard the opening between the left atrium and the left ventricles. The opening of the right and the left ventricles into the pulmonary artery and the aorta, respectively, are provided with the semilunar valves. The valves in the heart allow the blood flow of blood only in the one direction, from the atria to the ventricles and from ventricles to the pulmonary artery or aorta. These valves prevent any backward flow. The entire heart is made of cardiac muscles. The walls of ventricles are much thicker than that of the atria. A specialized cardiac musculature called the nodal tissue is also distributed in the heart. A patch of this tissue is present in the right upper corner of the right atrium called the sinoatrial node. Yeah, capital SAN. Another mass of this tissue is seen in the lower left corner of the right atrium close to the atrioventricular septum called the atrioventricular node. A bundle of nodal fiber, atrioventricular bundle, continues from the AVN which passes through the atrioventricular septa to emerge on the top of the interventricular septum and immediately divides into a right and left bundles. These branches give rise to minute fibers throughout the ventricular musculature of the respective sides and are called Purkinje fiber. The nodal musculature has the ability to generate action potential without any external stimuli. It is auto-excitable. However, the number of action potential that could be generated in a minute vary at different part of the nodal system. The SCN can generate the maximum number of action potential 70 to 75 per minute and is responsible for initiating and maintaining the rhythmic contractile activity of the heart. Therefore, it is called the pacemaker. Our heart normally beats 70 to 75 times in a minute, average 72 beats per minute. Cardiac cycle. How does the heart function? हार्ट कैसे फंक्शन करता है? लेट अस टेक अ लुक. चलो इसे देखते नहीं सुनते हैं. To begin with, all the four chambers of heart are in a relaxed state. They are in joint diastole. As the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are open, blood from the pulmonary veins and vena cava flow into the left and right ventricles, respectively through the left and right atria. The semilunar valves are closed at this stage. The SA in मतलब C no atrial node no generates an action potential which stimulates both the atria to undergo a stimulus contraction. The atrial systole. This increase the flow of blood into the ventricles by about 30%. The action potential is conducted to the ventricular side by the AVN and AV bundles from where the bundle of his transmit it through the entire ventricular musculature. This causes the ventricular muscles to contract. The atria undergoes relaxation coinciding with the ventricular systole. Ventricular systole increase the ventricular pressure causing the closure of tricuspid and bicuspid valves due to attempted backflow of blood into the atria. As the ventricular pressure increases further, the semilunar valves guarding the pulmonary artery and the aorta are forced open, allowing the blood in the ventricles to flow through these vessels into the circulatory pathway. The ventricles now relax and the ventricular pressure falls, causing the closure of semilunar valves, which prevents the backflow of blood into the ventricles. As the ventricular pressure declines further, the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are pushed open by pressure in the atria exerted by the blood which was being emptied into them by the veins. The blood now once again moves freely to the ventricles. The ventricles and atria are now again in a relaxed state. As earlier shown, the SAN generate a new action potential and the event described above are repeated in that sequence and the process continuous. This sequential events in the heart which is cyclically repeated is called the cardiac cycle and it consists of systole and diastole of both the atria and ventricles. As mentioned earlier by the heart beats 72 per minute that makes cardiac cycle are performed per minute. From this, it could be deduced that the duration of a cardiac cycle is zero point 0.8 seconds. During a cardiac cycle, each ventricle pumps out approximately 70 ml of blood, which is called the stroke volume. Stroke volume कितना होता है 70 ml. The stroke volume multiplied by the heart rate number of beats पर मिनट और एक बीट्स पर मिनट कितना होता है 70 to 70 gives the cardiac output. Therefore, the cardiac output can be defined as the volume of blood pumped out of each ventricle per minute, average 5000 ml or liter. The body has the ability to alter the stroke volume as well as heart rate and thereby the cardiac output. For example, the cardiac output of an athlete will be much higher than that of an ordinary man. During each cardiac cycle, two prominent sounds are produced which can be easily heard through a stethoscope. The first heard sound lub is associated with the closure of the tricuspid and bicuspid valves, whereas the second heard sound is associated with the closure of the semilunar valves. These sounds are of clinical diagnostic significance. Electrocardiograph ECG. You are probably familiar with this scene from a typical hospital television show. A patient is hooked up to a monitoring machine that shows voltage traces on a screen and makes the sound beep 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 as the patient goes into cardiac arrest. This type of machine, electrocardiograph. दोस्त ये बात बिल्कुल ध्यान रखना कि जो मशीन का नाम है वो उसका नाम इलेक्ट्रोकार्डियोग्राफ है। क्या? इलेक्ट्रोकार्डियोग्राफ। और जो ग्राफ आता है उसे ग्राफ नहीं इलेक्ट्रोकार्डियोग्राम बोलते हैं। यहाँ जस्ट उल्टा है। ECG इज अ ग्राफिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ द इलेक्ट्रिकल एक्टिविटी ऑफ द हार्ट ड्यूरिंग अ cardiac cycle. To obtain a standard ECG as shown in the figure 18.3, a patient is connected to the machine with 3 electrical leads, one to each wrist and left ankle, that continuously monitor the heart activity. For detailed evolution of the heart function, multiple leads are attached to the chest region. Here, we will talk only about standard ECG. Each peak in the ECG is identified with a letter from P to T that correspond to a specific electrical activity of the heart. The P wave represents the electrical excitation or depolarization of the atria, which leads to the contraction of both the atria. The QRS complex represents the depolarization of the ventricles, which initiates the ventricular contraction. The contraction starts shortly after Q and marks the beginning of the systole. The T wave represents the returns of the ventricles from excited to normal state. Repolarization. The end of the T wave marks the end of systole. Obviously, by counting the number of QRS complexes that occur in a given time period, one can determine the heartbeat rate of an individual. Since the ECG obtained from the different individuals have roughly the same shape for a given lead configuration, any deviation from this shape indicates a possible abnormality or disease. Hence, it is a great clinical significance. Double circulation. अब हम पढ़ेंगे पॉइंट नंबर 18.4 डबल सर्कुलेशन. The blood flows strictly by a fixed route through blood vessels, the arteries and veins. Basically, each artery and veins consist of 3 layers: an inner lining of squamous endothelium, the tunica intima, a middle layer of smooth muscles and elastic fibers, the tunica media, and an external layer of fibrous connective tissue with collagen fiber. The tunica externa. The tunica media is comparatively thin in the veins. As mentioned earlier, the blood pumped by the right ventricle enters the pulmonary artery, whereas the left ventricle pumps blood into the aorta. The deoxygenated blood pumped into the pulmonary artery is passed on to the lungs, from where the oxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. This pathway constitutes the pulmonary circulation. The oxygenated blood entering the aorta is carried by a network of arteries, arterioles, and capillaries to the tissue, from where the deoxygenated blood is collected by a system of venules, veins, and vena cava and emptied into the right atrium. This is the systematic circulation. The systematic circulation provides nutrients, oxygen, and other essential substances to the tissue and takes carbon dioxide and other harmful substances away for elimination. A unique vascular connection exists between the digestive tract and liver, called hepatic portal system. Hepatic portal vein carried blood from intestine to the liver before it is delivered to the systemic circulation. A special coronary system of blood vessels is present in our body exclusively for the circulation of blood to and from the cardiac musculature. Regulation of cardiac activity. Normal activity of the heart are regulated intrinsically, auto-regulated by specialized muscles, nodal tissue, hence the heart is called myogenic. A special neural center in the medulla oblongata can moderate the cardiac function through autonomic nervous system ANS. Neural signals through the sympathetic nervous can increase the rate of heartbeat, the strength of ventricular contraction, and thereby the cardiac output. On the other hand, parasympathetic neural signals, another component of ANS, decrease the rate of heartbeat, speed of conduction, affection, potential, and thereby the cardiac output. Adrenal medullary hormone can also increase the cardiac output. Disorder of circulatory system, high blood pressure. High blood pressure मतलब hypertension. Hypertension is the form of blood pressure that is higher than normal, 120 by 80. In this measurement, 120 mm of Hg is the millimeters of mercury pressure is the systolic, and the pumping pressure, and 80 mm of Hg is the diastolic or resting pressure. 120 क्या है, सिस्टोलिक या पंपिंग प्रेशर है, और 80 mm Hg क्या है, डायस्टोलिक या रेस्टिंग प्रेशर है. If repeated checks of blood pressure of an individual is 140 by 90, यहाँ पे 140 क्या है, सिस्टोलिक. सिस्टोलिक मतलब पंपिंग प्रेशर, और 90 क्या है, डायस्टोलिक या रेस्टिंग प्रेशर. It show hypertension. High blood pressure leads to heart disease and also affect vital organs like brain and kidney. Coronary artery disease, CAD. Coronary artery disease, often referred to as atherosclerosis, affect the vessels that atherosclerosis affect the vessels that supply blood to the heart muscles. It is caused by deposits of calcium. कोरोनरी आर्टरी डिजीज किस वजह से होता है, कैल्शियम, फैट, कोलेस्ट्रॉल, फाइब्रस टिश्यू के डिपोजिट होने से. विच मेक्स द ल्यूमेन ऑफ आर्टरी नैरोअर. जब वो डिपॉजिट होगा तो सिंपल बात है कि जो हमारा आर्टरी है वो पतला हो जाएगा, और इसके वजह से जो बीमारी होगी उसका नाम कोरोनरी आर्टरी डिजीज. और इसमें कोरोनरी से मतलब ही होता है क्या, नैरो. हमारा जो आर्टरी होगा वो नैरो होगा, तो हमारे आर्टरी के नैरो होने वाला डिजीज. अब हम पढ़ते हैं एंजीना. Angina pectoris. It is also called angina pectoris. A symptom of acute chest pain appear when no enough oxygen is reaching the heart muscle. Angina can occur in men and women of any age, but it is more common among the middle age and elderly. It occurs due to conditions that affect the blood flow. Heart failure. अब हम पढ़ेंगे heart failure के बारे में. Heart failure means the state of heart when it is not pumping blood effectively enough to meet the needs of the blood. It is sometimes called congestive heart failure because congestion of the lungs is one of the main symptoms of this disease, heart failure, is not the same of cardiac arrest. कार्डियक अरेस्ट जब हार्ट स्टॉप हो जाएगा बीट करना तो उसे बोलते हैं कार्डियक अरेस्ट। या हार्ट अटैक जब हार्ट का मसल अचानक से डैमेज हो जाता है तो इसे बोलते हैं। और इनएडिक्वेट ब्लड सप्लाई और ब्लड सप्लाई इनएडिक्वेट हो जाता है तो उसे बोलते हैं हार्ट अटैक। थैंक यू फ्रेंड्स, अब तक हमारे साथ बने रहने के लिए।